Good evening, everyone. It's time for Ghost Stories with Kitten. Let's read some real, true paranormal tales, read to you by a real human, not AI. Let's go.
This isn't a new story, but it happened sort of recently. So I'll begin by giving some background on myself, since I believe it could have something to do with the incident. I've always had a powerful sort of intuition, not psychic or clairvoyant, but maybe something close. I could just sense things before learning the facts or the truth. I've had strange experiences my whole life. When I was younger, I would get this rush of euphoria and, for lack of a better word, love out of nowhere and for no reason. It was always very intense and lasted for several minutes, but it was a good experience. It felt like I was wrapped in the embrace of something powerful. I felt complete, euphoria, happiness, and a sort of energy that was extremely powerful. When this would happen, it was like the world around me seemed brighter as well, like there was some sort of light that was being emitted from within everything, much like an aura, but even coming from inanimate objects. That's as best as I can describe it. It felt as though there was a presence, but I can't be certain, as I never actually saw anyone or anything of note besides the increased brightness of the world around me. It was just weird, and these incidents have always struck out in my mind. But, for whatever reason, I haven't had a similar experience since I was a child. The last one I can remember was when I was in first grade. However, that was the most powerful one of all, and I remember it vividly. I've always just felt different in a way I can't quite describe. Not in a way that makes me special or anything. I don't want to come off as believing that I am somehow special or better. I've just noticed I think differently, and I have always been a very deep and philosophical person, especially as I got older. But I had deep thoughts and opinions as a child, too. This has remained with me my entire life, and I still feel this way now as an adult. I've always been a searcher, one who is constantly searching for the meanings behind life and how everything functions. So, with a story, there is a sort of build up to the actual event. It began as something simple, but weird nonetheless. I noticed that when I was lying in bed, it felt like my bed was slightly shaking. At first, I just dismissed it as being in my head, but as time went on, I became more and more certain that it was actually happening. I started paying more attention to it as a result. After a while, I began to feel something pressing on my back from within my mattress. I know it sounds crazy, but that's what it felt like. I tried my damnedest to ignore it and tell myself I was imagining it, but it continued regardless. Night after night, I felt what seemed like arms and hands slightly pushing up from inside my mattress on my back. I tried lying completely still and focused on something in my room so I could see whether or not I was actually being pushed upwards. To my surprise, I was. I could actually see my view of the item changing as I was pushed slightly upward. I was baffled. I'd never been a believer or religious person. I always found a logical explanation or dismissed things as being my imagination. But this was different. I couldn't dismiss this as just my imagination, and I was certain I could feel and see myself move. It was real. I chose to ignore it and hope it ended. I even began to wonder if I was losing my mind. During this time, I started having nightmares of being chased and shot, which were extremely vivid. I felt the emotions and fear like I was actually there. When shot, I felt the pain and burning of a bullet ripping through my back. I even felt the heat of the bullet. I can remember this setting just as well as if I had actually spent time there. The place seemed very familiar, yet I can't place it. I only feel that I know this place somehow. I also experienced several events where I would wake up in sheer panic, consumed by fear, trapped in my room, which was unusually dark. By dark, I mean completely pitch black, to where I literally couldn't see my way around my room. During these events, I would jump out of my bed and frantically struggle to find my way to my door using just my hands. I'm beginning to feel very uncomfortable just talking about this. I'm reminded of the fear and panic I felt, and it turns my stomach into a knot. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. I hope I never experience it ever again. I can remember finding my door and collapsing to my knees once I was out of the door into the hallway. It took me days to get feeling right again, and to get it out of my head enough to sleep. But I dreaded the nights for a long time. I still have to have a light on in my room to this day. I am over 40 years old. It's not something I am proud to say, and it makes me feel weak. Now is the main event. So I remember that I had been experiencing the same shaking of my bed and pushing before falling asleep that night. I had fallen asleep for some time, but I am not sure how long. I have a tendency to wake up multiple times a night, and this night was no different. This is going to sound cliche, but I awoke at sometime around 3 a.m. and I was just lying in bed thinking. I'm not sure that the time has any bearing on the story, but I've wondered if it did. Perhaps the veil in between our world and the world beyond is truly thinner at this time. I remember I was wide awake, and I was considering turning on the TV. That's when the pushing on my back started up. Only this time, it was stronger than usual, and I thought I could feel individual fingers. At this point, I was kind of over the whole thing. I was just beginning to get angry and frustrated. As a result, I started kind of pushing back and shifting my weight and using my arms. Due to this, it seemed to stop for a time, so I turned on the TV and started watching Adult Swim. Great choice, by the way. But suddenly, I felt something else. I felt like something had risen out of my mattress because it was brushing past my arm as it came out. I was confused when I felt it, but not concerned because I just assumed in the moment it was my blanket or something. Nothing was visible, just the sensation. Suddenly, it became clear what it was because I felt a hand grab my left forearm tightly. I knew it was a hand because I could feel each finger as it clasped itself onto my arm. It wasn't cold or hot. It was just neutral. All I felt was the pressure. I immediately freaked out and rolled off the bed to the left, which was closest to my door. I remember my shock as my arm stayed firmly on the bed, but was able to rotate in the grip of the hand as I rolled, just like if someone grabbed your arm and hung on as you struggled and turned to free yourself. I could remember thinking, "This is all in your head," for a moment just before trying to pull my arm away. When I did try to pull my arm back, it remained stuck to the bed, and I could feel the grip tighten when I pulled. That's when my fight or flight response really kicked in, and I chose to fight. I began to punch as hard as I could where I thought the hand or arm to be. And in the dark of my room, only lit by my television, it felt as though I was hitting something. The sensation I felt as my first hit was strange, like punching squishy air. After a few solid hits, I felt its hold release and my arm was finally free. I immediately turned on my bedside lamp and looked at my bed to find nothing. Nothing at all. Just empty sheets. I still struggle to understand this event, and I still try to find ways to explain it to myself logically. I want to just brush it off as being something I imagined, but that's a lie. I know it wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't a dream either, and I know that deep down. I've always been a believer in science and the tangible. I've laughed in people's faces who told me to have faith. I've struggled with that my whole life. My motto has always been, if you can't prove it, it isn't real. Carl Sagan said it best when he said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That is what I live my life by. But I can't explain this, nor can I provide any proof beyond just my retelling of the story, and that eats at me. When asked about my religious preference, I always claimed agnostic. I had been that way since a very young age. I was around 4 or 5 years old when I decided I didn't believe in the church my family and I attended. It wasn't long after that I decided I didn't believe in any of the organized religions. But it was after this event, and one other I'll write up later, if you enjoyed this one, that I began to find myself becoming more spiritual. I still didn't belong to any church and never will. All of them are corrupt and very misleading anyway. I just feel more and more as I age that there is something more to this life than what we can see. I am still not certain what I believe, though. Just that I don't believe in the religions that exist today or their God. I just hope that maybe one day I'll figure it out. I mean, regardless, I'll figure it out when I die. We all will, I suppose. For the record, this story is 100% true. It really happened to me. It is not just some fictional tale meant to entertain. I feel I need to clarify that here.